And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Tuesday, August 5th, 2025. And we start with the state of the sea ice. Water open here across the Chukchi Sea and along the Chukchi Sea coast. We still have some remnant ice between Utqiagvik and Kaktovik, though that continues to gradually melt off, and that'll be the case as we head through the late summer season. We still have, in the wake of a stationary front that's draped here across the spine of the Brooks Range and out to the lower Chukchi Sea, winds are more out of an easterly direction here along the Beaufort Sea coast with temperatures in the mid and upper 30s. So looking at the satellite imagery, very clearly we have a ridge of high pressure North Pacific extending into the Gulf, and in between some scattered showers and a few thunderstorms, there's sunshine and temperatures still in the 70s in a number of locations south of the Brooks Range. We look to the west, and there is an area of low pressure currently just north of the central eastern Aleutians, and that feature is going to slide east-southeastward as we go through later Wednesday and Thursday. And eventually, a moist low is going to come up out of the North Pacific, even more so than this one in its front, and that'll have an atmospheric river component that'll bring some potential for some heavier rainfall along the northeastern Gulf Coast and Panhandle as we head into the early weekend, especially Saturday night, Friday night into Saturday. This front working its way up the Alaska Peninsula, though, could easily produce 2-3 inches of rainfall along there into Kodiak Island as we head through later tonight and during the day on Wednesday. So here is that system Wednesday afternoon, lower Alaska Peninsula, and as this front creeps northward, it'll spread moderate to locally heavier rainfall along the Alaska Peninsula through Shelikof Strait and into Lower Cook Inlet. As we look west or eastward, this ridge is beginning to get pinched off, and so it'll bring one more really decent day to the Panhandle with some sunshine. Temperatures warmer, could be up in the 70s in some spots, and Copper River Basin has a red flag warning because it's going to be breezy with temperatures in the 70s there and relative humidities down around 25%, and even the sunshine continuing in the central areas of the interior, and as you go down through the middle Yukon Valley and upper half of the Kuskokwim. But the front stays stationary to the north, and even into Thursday, that front's still just kind of hanging up there. It's, well, watching this low cross the Alaska Peninsula, the front, occluded front ahead of it will come a little further north and east, and eventually there's going to be a secondary low down here that has that atmospheric river that'll take aim toward southeast Alaska and the Panhandle, especially on Saturday. So in the meantime, look for pretty decent conditions across the inner channels Wednesday with some sunshine, waves a foot or two, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, northwest winds to 15 knots, maybe 2-3 foot waves. Get outside there, Ketchikan, Metlakatla. Outer coast off of Sitka down through Craig, northwest winds 15 knots, even outside of Cross Sound. Winds turn a little more easterly into Yakutat Bay and along Cape Suckling. And then on Thursday, those winds increase ahead of that front. So south winds 10 to 15 knots, inner channels, waves 2 to 3 feet. Outer coast, look for south winds of 20 knots off of Craig and Port Alexander, turning southeasterly off of Sitka, and then increasing to 25 to 30 knots and turning easterly as you get up toward Yakutat and especially Cape Suckling, with waves building 10 to 14 feet there in the nearshore waters off of the northeastern Gulf Coast. Now in for the Panhandle Wednesday with that front coming in sooner. We're going to have easterly winds to 35 knots there at the entrance of Cook Inlet and northeast of Kodiak Island with waves up to 10 feet. As we go further northeastward, variable winds only around 10 knots there outside of Hinchinbrook entrance to Kayak Island and within Prince William Sound with waves just a couple of feet. As we go up the Alaska Peninsula, up the Kenai Peninsula here in Cook Inlet, look for east-northeast winds at 15 knots and waves maybe a couple of few feet. But you can clearly see the influence of that front on Thursday, a stronger wind field. We are looking at gale force winds outside of Hinchinbrook entrance, 35-knot gales, as well as on the east side of the Kenai with 40 to 45-knot gales into lower Cook Inlet and northeast of Kodiak Island. Waves upwards of 12, even 14 feet there northeast of Kodiak Island and within Prince William Sound. Easterly winds of 30 knots with 6-foot waves. Northeast winds 30 knots off of Anchor Point with 6 to 8 foot waves. And Upper Cook Inlet, look for northeast winds of 20 knots and 4 to 5 foot waves. Wednesday, as that front creeps northeastward, Kodiak Island, especially Shelikof Strait, could be looking at easterly gales to 40 knots with waves of 10 feet. 35-knot easterly gales just in the nearshore waters off of Chignik and within Bristol Bay. And then as we come down the Alaska Peninsula, winds southeast to south at 15, 20 knots or so, they'll fall off. And then on Thursday, winds will come down around Kodiak Island, though still southeast winds to 30 knots within Shelikof Strait with 4 to 5 foot waves. Winds will be southeast 15 knots, Akiak down to Chignik, and then turning more west-northwesterly because that low is literally in this position on Thursday across the lower half of the Alaska Peninsula. Now, in the wake of this system across the Aleutians, initially southwest winds on Alaska, and they'll become more westerly, 15 to 20 knots, Atka to Adak, and then northwesterly winds Adak, west of Adak through Kiska and Shemya at 20 knots. And for Thursday, we continue to see generally winds in the wake of the low as it works its way across the lower Alaska Peninsula, generally northwest winds 20 to 15 knots as you get out here across the entire chain. So on Wednesday, with the low center just south of the Pribilovs, we have winds out of the northeast. Could be 40-knot gales within here Bristol Bay, and then northeast gales to 35 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay. And the Pribilovs looking at northeasterly winds at 25 knots and waves as high as 9 feet. Out of Norton Sound and along the lower Yukon coast, look for northeast winds of 10 to 15 knots and 2 to 3 foot waves. Thursday, winds will come down across the region, generally east-northeast winds out of Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, and then north to northeast winds around 20 knots, Norton Sound, and along the lower Yukon coast with waves of 3 to 4 feet there. And for areas on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, north winds of 10 to 15 knots, including the west side of the Seward Peninsula, Wales to near Nome. As we go up through the Chukchi Sea, east winds 15 knots out of Kotzebue Sound Wednesday, and then eventually they become northeasterly 15 knots from Cape Lisburne up to Wainwright, and then easterly winds around 15 knots along the Beaufort Sea coast with waves 2 to 3 feet. And for Thursday, winds are generally easterly along the Beaufort Sea coast, Kaktovik through Utqiagvik at 15 knots with waves 2 to 3 feet, and then dropping down. Along the Chukchi Sea, we're looking at northeast to north winds of 20 to 25 knots with waves of 4 to 5 feet. And passing through the Bering Strait, there will be northerly winds of 25 knots to that of the north side of St. Lawrence Island, the west side of the Seward Peninsula, with waves on Thursday in that area generally running right around 5 feet.